Welcome to the Fear Files channel. Today we'll delve into one of the most mysterious and widely discussed disappearances of recent years, the case of Nicola Bulley, which literally paralyzed the United Kingdom in early 2023. This story began as an ordinary morning walk with a dog and turned into a national tragedy, spawning countless conspiracy theories, mass hysteria on social media, and serious questions about the role of police, media, and the public in missing person investigations. January 27th, 2023, Friday. An ordinary winter day in the small village of St. Michael's-on-Wyre in Lancashire, northwest England. 45-year-old Nicola Bulley, mother of two daughters and a mortgage advisor working from home, does what she did every morning after taking the children to school. Goes for a walk with her Springer Spaniel Willow along the River Wyre. This was her daily ritual, a route she knew by heart, a path she had walked hundreds of times. But that morning, something went terribly wrong. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, Nicola left the house. The weather was typical for a British winter, cool, damp, but not extreme. She was dressed in a black Engelbert Strauss jacket, black skinny jeans, and green rubber boots. She wore turquoise, waterproof gloves. Her golden spaniel Willow, as always, accompanied her. Nicola took her phone, an iPhone that she used not only for communication, but also for listening to music during walks. That morning, she was also on a work team's conference, but with the camera and microphone turned off, just listening to colleagues while walking. This was normal practice for her, combining work and her morning walk. Nicola's route ran along the River Wyre, a picturesque, but at that time of year, quite cold and fast-flowing river. The path wound through fields, past benches and gates through which locals often passed with their dogs. It was a quiet, peaceful place where everyone knew each other. Typical English countryside where crime was rare and people felt safe. At approximately 9:10 in the morning, one of Nicola's acquaintances saw her in the upper field, not far from the entrance to the path. Nicola was with Willow. Everything looked absolutely normal. They greeted each other and went their separate ways. This was the last confirmed sighting of Nicola alive. At 9:33, according to her phone records, the team's conference ended. The phone remained active, but Nicola no longer answered calls. Around 9:20, maybe a little later, another local resident who was also walking her dog discovered the spaniel Willow running back and forth between the gate and a bench by the river. The dog was off-leash, clearly agitated and disoriented. The woman knew Willow and Nicola by sight, often seeing them on walks. She looked around, trying to find Nicola, but she was nowhere to be seen. Then she noticed Nicola's phone lying on the bench, connected to the team's conference, which was still ongoing. Next to the phone was Willow's leash, neatly placed on the bench. This was strange. Very strange. Nicola would never have left her dog alone, especially without a leash in a place where a path ran along the river. She wouldn't have left her phone on the bench, especially during a work conference. The woman took Willow and the phone and began searching for Nicola, asking other passersby if they had seen her. No one had seen anything. It was becoming increasingly obvious that something was wrong. At 10:50 in the morning, just over an hour after Nicola was last seen, Lancashire police received a call about a missing woman. An investigation began that would soon become one of the most intense and controversial in modern British history. The first hours of the investigation were critical. Police quickly arrived on the scene and began searching. The path along the river was cordoned off, fields were combed through, witnesses were questioned. A key point was the River Wyre. The bench where the phone was found was just a few meters from the water. The river at that location was deep, cold, and had a strong current. From the very beginning, Police worked on the theory that Nicola might have fallen into the river, possibly slipping on the bank or trying to retrieve a ball for the dog. But there were problems with this theory. Why was the leash neatly folded on the bench? If Nicola had fallen into the river, fighting for her life or in a panic, wouldn't she have screamed? Wouldn't the dog have made more noise? The path was quite well traveled, even on a weekday morning. Could no one have heard or seen anything? And most importantly, where was the body? Police immediately began extensive searches in and around the river. Divers were deployed, specialized search teams, helicopters, drones, search dogs. Both riverbanks were combed for many miles downstream. All tributaries, backwaters, places where the current could have washed a body ashore were checked. Sonar was used to scan the river bottom. Local residents joined the searches, combing through fields, barns, abandoned buildings. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansel, and her family were in despair. Paul publicly appealed for help, begging anyone who knew anything to come forward. Nicola's two daughters, aged 6 and 9, were suddenly left without a mother, not understanding what had happened. The story began appearing in local and then national news. The media immediately picked up the story. A young mother vanished without a trace during a morning walk with her dog. Phone and dog left at the scene, no signs of struggle or crime. As the days passed and Nicola wasn't found, the story became increasingly mysterious and compelling to the public. Police continued to insist on the river theory, but many people began to doubt. If she really fell into the river, why hadn't her body surfaced yet? The river was searched again and again. The most modern equipment was used, but there were no traces of Nicola. It was at this moment that one of the darkest chapters of this story began to unfold. The mass intervention of internet detectives and the spread of conspiracy theories on social media, especially on TikTok. The Nicola Bulley case went viral in the worst sense of the word. Thousands of people who had no connection to the investigation, no special training or access to real information, began putting forward their own theories about what happened. TikTok turned into a real breeding ground for speculation. Bloggers filmed videos analyzing every detail of the case, often with complete disregard for the facts or consequences for Nicola's family. Some claimed it was murder, that someone had abducted Nicola, possibly someone she knew. Others talked about human trafficking, about criminal networks allegedly operating in the Lancashire countryside. There were theories that Nicola had staged her own disappearance, that she had run away from her life, abandoning her family. Each theory was more outlandish than the last, and each spread like wildfire. Worse still, some of these internet detectives began physically traveling to St. Michael's-on-Wire, turning the quiet village into a circus. They filmed videos at the disappearance site, trespassed on private property, harassed local residents, made accusations against innocent people. One blogger was arrested for breach of the peace after filming Nicola's house and disturbing neighbors. Others accused Nicola's partner, Paul Ansel, without any basis, simply because in such cases the closest people are often suspected. Police were forced to publicly ask people to stop speculating and interfering with the investigation. They issued several statements, begging the public to trust the work to professionals and stop spreading misinformation. But it was already too late. The genie was out of the bottle. Social media was buzzing. Everyone considered themselves an expert. Everyone had their own theory. This was a telling example of how the internet can turn tragedy into entertainment and an investigation into a show. About 2 weeks after the disappearance, on February 14th, police made a controversial decision that sparked a storm of criticism. In an attempt to explain to the public why they continued to focus on the river theory and ignore other possibilities, Lancashire police disclosed personal information about Nicola. They reported that she had faced some significant alcohol problems caused by her struggle with menopause, and that in the past there had been episodes when police had contacted her due to concerns about her well-being. This disclosure caused a huge scandal. Critics, including women's rights groups and human rights specialists, accused the police of violating Nicola's privacy, of essentially victim blaming in an attempt to justify their own investigation. Why was it necessary to disclose such personal information? How did this help find Nicola? Many perceive this as an attempt by police to protect themselves from criticism, suggesting that Nicola was in a vulnerable state and therefore more likely to have fallen into the river accidentally or even intentionally. Nicola's family was furious. Paul Ansell publicly condemned the police, stating that the disclosure of this information was unnecessary and harmful, that it had disgraced Nicola's memory and caused additional pain to an already suffering family. He emphasized that Nicola had indeed had problems in the past, but she was actively working on them, seeing specialists, and this should not define her or the circumstances of her disappearance. Pressure on the police grew from all sides. The media criticized their methods. The public demanded answers. The family was in despair, and internet detectives continued to sow chaos. Meanwhile, the searches continued. The river wire was searched again and again. Increasingly sophisticated technologies were used. Experts from other regions were brought in. On February 19th, almost 3 weeks after Nicola's disappearance, the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for, but everyone feared occurred. A body was discovered in the river wire, approximately a mile downstream from where Nicola had disappeared. It was found in dense reed beds near the shore, partially hidden by vegetation, which explained why it hadn't been discovered earlier despite intensive searches. The body was officially identified as Nicola Bulley. Forensic examination showed that death had resulted from drowning. There were no signs of crime, no traces of struggle or violence, no evidence of third-party involvement. According to the official conclusion, Nicola had probably fallen into the river accidentally, possibly slipping on the wet bank or losing her balance, and drowned in the cold, fast-flowing water. The cold water could have caused shock, paralyzing her ability to swim or call for help. The current quickly carried her body downstream, where it became stuck in vegetation. For Nicola's family, this was devastating, but in some sense also a relief. At least now, there was certainty. Now they knew what had happened and could begin the process of saying goodbye. For the police, this was confirmation of their theory, albeit a bitter one. They had been right about the river all along, but hadn't been able to find the body for 3 weeks despite extensive searches. But for many people, especially those who have been actively following the case online, this was not a satisfactory answer. Why did it take so long to find a body in a river that had been searched many times? Why didn't the dog make more noise when her owner fell into the water? Why was the leash neatly folded on the bench? These questions continued to circulate, fueling conspiracy theories even after the body was found. In June 2023, an official investigation into the circumstances of Nicola's death took place. An inquest, as it's called in the British legal system. The coroner, having examined all the evidence, witness testimony, forensic reports, and expert conclusions, returned a verdict of accidental death. It was officially established that Nicola Bulley had accidentally fallen into the river wire and drowned, that there was no crime or third-party involvement, and that her death was a tragic accident. The coroner also spoke critically about the role of social media in the case, noting that irresponsible speculation and interference by internet users had caused enormous harm to Nicola's family and complicated police work. He called for greater responsibility from social media platforms and users, emphasizing that the tragedies of real people should not be turned into entertainment or a subject for speculation. But even after the official verdict, many questions remained. Not legal questions, but broader ones concerning how society, media, and police handle such cases. The Nicola Bulley case became a catalyst for serious discussions about numerous problematic aspects of modern life. First, the role of social media and internet detectives. Nicola's case revealed the dark side of online culture, where everyone considers themselves entitled to interfere in real investigations, where speculation spreads faster than facts, and tragedies turn into viral content. TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all these platforms were flooded with theories, accusations, videos, often with complete disregard for the consequences for real people suffering from the loss of a loved one. Psychologists and sociologists note that this phenomenon is related to several factors. People feel detached from reality when looking at a screen. They forget that behind every story are real people with real emotions. There's also an element of excitement, a detective game, a desire to be the one who solves the mystery. Social media algorithms encourage sensational content because it generates more views, likes, comments. This creates a vicious circle where the most outlandish theories get the most distribution, even if they're the least plausible. Nicola's case also raised serious questions about police actions. The disclosure of personal information about her alcohol and mental health problems was widely condemned as a violation of privacy and unnecessary victim shaming. Police later acknowledged this was a mistake, that they shouldn't have disclosed such information without extreme necessity. This led to a review of protocols about what information could be disclosed to the public during an investigation and under what circumstances. Questions also arose about why the search took so long. Police insisted they had done everything possible, that the river was difficult to search, with strong currents, dense vegetation, and limited underwater visibility. Water search experts confirmed that finding a body in such conditions can be extremely difficult, that bodies can become stuck in unexpected places hidden from ordinary view. Nevertheless, many wondered whether police could have done more, used other methods or technologies. Another aspect that sparked wide discussion was media coverage. On one hand, intense media attention helped mobilize the public and resources to search for Nicola. On the other hand, constant dwelling on the topic, speculation, sometimes irresponsible coverage caused pain to the family and fueled internet hysteria. Where is the line between public interest and invasion of privacy? When does coverage help and when does it harm? Nicola's family spoke publicly about their experience after her death. Paul Ansel and Nicola's relatives talked about how traumatizing not only the disappearance and death itself had been, but also what followed: the invasion of their lives, speculation, accusations, constant camera attention. They called for greater empathy, for understanding that behind every news story are real people experiencing unimaginable pain. Nicola's two daughters lost their mother under tragic circumstances and then were forced to watch as their family tragedy played out in public, as strangers discussed, argued, accused, speculated. The psychological damage from such an experience is hard to overestimate. The family created a foundation in Nicola's memory, aimed at supporting other families experiencing similar losses and educating the public about the impact of irresponsible speculation on social media. The Nicola Bulley case also sparked broader discussion about women's safety and risk perception. Nicola disappeared in daylight, in a familiar place, doing something completely ordinary. This reminded many of how vulnerable people can be even in seemingly safe situations. Although the official investigation established it was an accident with no criminal involvement, the very fact that a woman could vanish without a trace in this way sparked concern and discussions about safety. Were lessons learned from this case? In some sense, yes. Police reviewed some of their procedures. Social media came under criticism, and there were calls for greater regulation and accountability. Media and journalists discussed the ethics of covering such cases. But has anything fundamentally changed in the culture of internet speculation or in how society responds to such tragedies? That's less obvious. Several months later, other disappearance cases attracted the same intense attention and the same problems with internet detectives. It seems the culture of online speculation and viral content around real tragedies is so deeply rooted that changing it will be extremely difficult. Nicola's personality, who she was in life, was often lost in the noise surrounding her disappearance and death. Those who knew her described Nicola as a loving mother, devoted partner, good friend. She worked as a mortgage advisor and was known for her professionalism and kindness to clients. She loved spending time with her daughters, walking with the dog, enjoying the simple pleasures of rural life. Like many, she had her problems and challenges, struggling with menopause, sometimes with alcohol, with the pressure of balancing work and family life. But she was a real person, complex and multifaceted, not just a character in an internet detective story. Her death was a tragic accident, a moment of bad luck on an ordinary day. She was walking along a familiar path, perhaps distracted for a second, perhaps slipped on wet ground, and fell into the cold, fast-flowing water. In a matter of seconds, her life ended. It's a reminder of the fragility of existence, of how quickly everything can change. As for the technical aspects of the case, experts on water incidents and drowning explain that what happened to Nicola is, unfortunately, not that rare. Cold water can cause what's called cold shock, an involuntary bodily response to sudden immersion in cold water, which includes difficulty breathing, panic, rapid loss of coordination. Even good swimmers can be paralyzed by cold shock. Additionally, heavy clothing and boots, which Nicola was wearing, quickly become saturated with water and become extremely heavy, making swimming virtually impossible. The fast current of the river Wire meant that even if Nicola had remained on the surface for a short time, she would have been quickly carried downstream. If she lost consciousness or couldn't stay afloat due to cold and the weight of clothing, she would have drowned quickly. The body was then carried by the current until it became stuck in reeds about a mile downstream, where it remained hidden by vegetation until it was discovered. Why didn't the dog make more noise? Willow was found agitated, running between the gate and bench, clearly searching for Nicola. Dogs react to such situations differently. Some bark and make noise. Others become confused and disoriented. Willow probably saw Nicola fall into the water, perhaps even tried to follow her to the water's edge, but then, not understanding what to do, returned to a familiar place, the gate and bench, expecting Nicola to return. Why was the leash neatly on the bench? Nicola probably placed it there before something drew her attention to the river. Maybe she saw something in the water. Maybe Willow's ball fell in. Maybe she just walked to the edge to look at something, slipped, and fell. This could have happened in seconds, too quickly to react or call for help. The fact that the phone remained on the bench with an active team's conference added an element of surrealism. Nicola's colleagues continued their work meeting, unaware that on the other end of the line a tragedy was unfolding. This is a detail that struck many. Modern technology, connecting us constantly, but unable to prevent a tragedy occurring just a few meters from the device. The investigation also checked other versions, as it should have. Were there witnesses to anything suspicious that morning? Was anyone else on the path at the critical time? CCTV cameras in the vicinity were checked. Everyone who was in the area that morning was questioned. No evidence of strangers present. No suspicious vehicles. No witnesses to anything unusual except the discovery of the dog and phone. Phone records, financial transactions, Nicola's online activity were checked. Nothing indicated that she was planning to disappear or harm herself. Her relationship with Paul, although it had its tensions as in any relationship, was stable. She loved her children and was actively involved in their lives. She had plans for the future, work commitments, social arrangements. Everything indicated that she intended to return home after the walk and continue her day. The version that something medical could have happened was also checked: a sudden seizure, loss of consciousness that could have led to a fall. Forensic examination found no evidence of any medical event before drowning. But such things don't always leave traces, especially after being in water for 3 weeks. Ultimately, the most likely explanation, supported by all available evidence, is that Nicola accidentally slipped or lost her balance at the water's edge and fell into the river. Cold shock and fast current left her no chance. It was a tragic accident, one of those moments when many small factors converged in an unfortunate way, leading to a catastrophic result. Such cases remind us of the importance of water safety. Many people underestimate the danger of rivers, especially in cold weather. Water can look calm on the surface, but have strong underwater currents. Banks can be slippery, especially after rain. Cold water is dangerous not only for the risk of hypothermia, but also for the immediate shock it causes upon immersion. After Nicola's death, local authorities and charitable organizations dealing with water safety conducted awareness campaigns. Additional warning signs were installed along the river wire. Educational events were held in schools and communities about water-related risks. What to do if someone falls into cold water. How to safely spend time near water. Nicola's memory lives on in her family, friends, and community. A memorial bench was installed in her honor in St. Michael's-on-Wye, a place where people can come, remember, reflect. Every year on the anniversary of her death, family and friends gather to honor her memory. Her daughters are growing up, carrying the memory of their mother, supported by their father and extended family. Nicola Bulley's story has also become the subject of several documentaries and detailed journalistic investigations, trying to understand not only what happened, but also why this case so captured the public imagination and what lessons can be learned. These works explore the psychology of mass hysteria, the role of social media in modern society, the ethics of media coverage of tragedies. One of the most striking aspects of the case was how ordinary the beginning was. Nicola was doing what millions of people do every day: walking the dog, working remotely, enjoying the morning. Nothing foretold tragedy. And it's precisely this ordinariness that makes the case so disturbing and compelling to people. If this could happen to Nicola in her own village, on a familiar path, then it could happen to anyone, anywhere. This is an uncomfortable truth that most people prefer not to acknowledge. That life is fragile, that accidents happen, that sometimes there's no dramatic explanation, no villain, no deep meaning. Sometimes tragedy is just tragedy, an accident, a moment of bad luck. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why so many people clung to alternative theories. Because accepting a simple, random tragedy is psychologically harder than imagining a conspiracy or crime, something that could have been prevented or explained. The case also raised questions about how society deals with uncertainty. For 3 weeks, no one knew what happened to Nicola. This uncertainty was unbearable for the family and made the public seek explanations, any explanations. The human mind doesn't tolerate an information vacuum well. We tend to fill gaps with theories, even if they're baseless. This is an evolutionary trait that helped our ancestors survive. But in the modern world of social media and instant communication, it can lead to the spread of misinformation and mass hysteria. Police were right to focus on the river from the beginning. Their instincts and experience told them that under such circumstances, phone and dog left by the river, no witnesses to crime, familiar place. The most likely explanation was an accident by the water. But in an era when everyone has a platform and opinion, professional judgment of experts is often questioned or ignored in favor of more sensational theories. This led to an interesting discussion about trust in institutions. Why did so many people not trust the official version and prefer theories from TikTok? In part, this reflects a broader crisis of trust in authorities that exists in modern society. People are skeptical of government, police, media. They prefer to believe alternative sources, even if these sources have no authority or expertise. Social media amplifies this tendency, creating echo chambers where people surround themselves with information confirming their biases. In Nicola's case, many internet detectives initially didn't believe police because they couldn't understand why the body wasn't found faster. They didn't understand the technical complexities of water searches, had no idea how bodies behave in water, about the influence of current, temperature, vegetation. But instead of acknowledging their lack of knowledge and trusting experts, they assumed conspiracy or incompetence. This is a problem that extends far beyond the Nicola Bulley case. We see it in climate change denial, in anti-vaccination movements, in conspiracy theories around major events. People think that a few hours of reading on the internet makes them as or more qualified than specialists who have spent years studying the subject. This is a dangerous tendency that undermines not only specific investigations, but the very fabric of an informed society. How can we solve this problem? Education in critical thinking and media literacy is one answer. People need to learn to evaluate information sources, understand the difference between facts and opinions, recognize their own cognitive biases. Social media platforms must also bear greater responsibility for the content they distribute, especially when this content concerns real people and events. But changing culture is difficult and takes time. Meanwhile, there will be other cases like the Nicola Bulley case, where a family's tragedy becomes a spectacle for the online crowd. Each of us bears personal responsibility for how we interact with such information, how we respond to news about real people experiencing real tragedies. Perhaps the most important lesson from Nicola's case is a simple reminder about empathy. Behind every news story, behind every viral post, are real people with real emotions. Nicola was not a character in a detective story, but a living, breathing person with a family, dreams, fears, hopes. Her death was a tragedy for those who loved her, and turning this tragedy into entertainment or a subject for speculation was deeply disrespectful and harmful. Before sharing a theory, before leaving a comment, before creating a video about someone's tragedy, it's worth stopping and thinking. How would I feel if this were my mother, my partner, my sister? Would I want strangers on the internet to speculate, accuse, turn the darkest moment of my life into viral content? This simple act of imagination, the ability to put oneself in another's place, is the foundation of empathy and humanity. The Nicola Bulley case ended tragically but predictably. An accident, drowning, no mystery, no conspiracy. But the questions it raised about social media, ethics, trust, empathy remain relevant and will influence how we handle similar cases in the future. Will we learn from mistakes, or will history repeat itself again and again? There are no answers to these questions yet, but what we can do is remember Nicola Bulley not as a mystery or spectacle, but as a person who deserves dignity, respect, and peace. Her family continues to live with the loss every day, and the least we can do is honor her memory, not by turning her into another story for entertainment, but by acknowledging her humanity and the value of her life. Her story also makes us think about how vulnerable we all are in everyday life. Nicola was a careful woman. She knew this path like the back of her hand. She wasn't reckless or inexperienced. And yet one moment of inattention, one slippery step was enough to change everything. This is a humbling lesson for all of us. A reminder that we cannot control everything, that life is unpredictable, that tragedy can happen regardless of how prepared or careful we are. For the local community of St. Michael's on Wire, this case left a deep scar. The quiet village, where everyone knew each other, where crime was rare, suddenly found itself at the center of a media hurricane. Village residents were concerned not only about Nicola's disappearance, but also about the invasion of outsiders, journalists, bloggers, curious onlookers. Their private life was violated, their peace destroyed. Even after Nicola was found and the case officially closed, it took time for the village to return to normal life. Some locals talked about how they became more cautious by the river, how they now avoid certain places or look at familiar paths with different eyes. The tragedy changed the perception of a place that previously seemed completely safe. Parents became more vigilant with their children near water, dog owners more attentive during walks. Nicola's death became a grim reminder of hidden dangers even in the most idyllic surroundings. Psychologists studying the impact of such events on communities note that collective trauma is real. When tragedy happens to someone local, especially under such circumstances, it affects the entire community. People begin to reassess their own safety, feel more vulnerable. Trust can be undermined. In the case of St. Michael's on Wire, the invasion of media and internet detectives was added, which exacerbated the community's trauma. Nicola's family in the following months and years tried to restore some semblance of normal life. Paul Ansel continued raising two daughters alone, which was an enormous task. He spoke publicly about how difficult it was to explain to the girls what happened to their mother, how to help them cope with grief while dealing with his own. He also spoke about the anger and disappointment he felt toward those who used his family's tragedy to create content, to promote their channels, to satisfy their own curiosity. Charitable foundations and initiatives were created in Nicola's memory. One focuses on water safety, working with local schools and communities to educate people about risks and how to minimize them. Another foundation supports families experiencing sudden loss, providing psychological help, financial support, and a community of people who understand what they're going through. There are also attempts to work with social media platforms to create better mechanisms for protecting people involved in such cases. How can the spread of misinformation be prevented? How can the privacy of families experiencing tragedy be protected? How can free speech be balanced with protection from harm? These are complex questions without simple answers, but Nicola's case has made them more relevant and urgent. Some platforms, after the Nicola Bulley case, introduced new policies regarding content related to missing persons or active investigations. TikTok, for example, strengthened moderation of content that may contain misinformation or harassment in the context of such cases. YouTube also updated its rules, prohibiting certain types of content that could harm victims' families. But the effectiveness of these measures remains debatable. Too much content, too few moderators, too easy to circumvent rules. There were also legislative initiatives in the United Kingdom aimed at regulating how media and social networks can cover active investigations of disappearances and crimes. Proposals included fines for platforms not removing harmful content and expansion of harassment and defamation laws to protect victims' families from online attacks. These initiatives are at various stages of discussion and implementation, and their long-term impact remains to be seen. It's also interesting to consider how Nicola's case compares with other high-profile disappearance cases. Each such case has unique elements, but also common patterns: media frenzy, conspiracy theories, public interference, pressure on police, family suffering. These themes repeat again and again. The Madeleine McCann case in 2007, the disappearance of Sarah Everard in 2021, and many others, all followed similar trajectories in how society and media reacted. What makes some cases more appealing to the public than others? Why did the Nicola Bulley case attract such frenzied attention while other disappearances are barely mentioned in the news? Sociologists point to several factors: race, class, gender, attractiveness, circumstances. There's an infamous phenomenon sometimes called missing white woman syndrome, the media and public's tendency to give disproportionate attention to cases of missing attractive white middle-class women, while ignoring cases of people of color, men, the poor, or marginalized groups. Nicola fell into the category that attracts media attention: white, middle-class, attractive, mother of 2 children, living in idyllic countryside. The circumstances of her disappearance were mysterious and intriguing. All this created a perfect storm for a media circus. But this also raised uncomfortable questions about why other disappearances don't receive the same attention and resources. Every missing person deserves equal attention and effort, regardless of demographics. But the reality is that this isn't the case. Activists and advocates for families of other missing people use the attention around Nicola's case to draw attention to their own cases. They organize campaigns, publish stories, try to use the moment to make the public aware that many people disappear without the same level of concern or investigation. This was a bittersweet moment. Nicola's tragedy drew attention to a broader problem, but also highlighted inequality in how society values and searches for different people. The technical aspect of the investigation also deserves attention. Lancashire police used a wide range of technologies and methods in searching for Nicola. Drones with thermal cameras flew over the area, trying to detect heat signatures. Sonar scanners scanned the river bottom, creating detailed maps of the underwater landscape. Search dogs combed the shoreline, trained to detect the scent of decomposing human remains. Divers repeatedly submerged in the river, despite dangerous conditions, cold water, poor visibility, strong current. Each of these methods has its limitations. Thermal cameras can detect a living person, but not a body that has cooled to ambient temperature. Sonar can be fooled by underwater vegetation, debris, features of the river bottom. Search dogs, though amazingly accurate, depend on wind, weather conditions, and can be distracted by other scents. Divers are limited by how long they can safely remain underwater and how far they can see in murky water. The fact that Nicola wasn't found for 3 weeks, despite all these efforts, speaks not to police incompetence, but to how complex searching for a body in an aquatic environment can be. A river is a dynamic system with currents, changing water levels, dense vegetation. A body can become stuck in an unexpected place, hidden from ordinary view, and remain there until changes in current or water level free it or make it more visible. Experts in searching for drowning victims say the statistics are quite grim. The longer a body is in water, the harder it is to find. Decomposition changes the buoyancy and appearance of the body. Animals and fish can damage remains. Current can move a body significant distances. In Nicola's case, the combination of cold water, which slows decomposition and therefore the floating process, and dense vegetation in the place where the body became stuck, explains the lengthy delay in discovery. When the body was finally found, it happened not through high-tech equipment, but through human observation. Someone noticed something unusual in the reeds and called police. This is a reminder that sometimes old methods, careful observation, local knowledge, human intuition, remain as important as technology. After the body was discovered and identified, forensic examination was thorough. The pathologist examined the body to determine cause of death and any signs of trauma or disease. Toxicological tests check for the presence of alcohol, drugs, or toxins. Clothing and personal items were examined. Every detail was documented for the upcoming inquest. The results were unambiguous. Cause of death, drowning, no signs of violence, no toxins in significant quantities, no evidence of any medical event before death. Injuries found on the body were consistent with being in the river, abrasions from rocks and debris, animal damage, decomposition effects. Nothing indicated another person's involvement. For the family, these results were simultaneously confirmation and a new blow. On one hand, there was nothing sinister. No one had intentionally harmed Nicola. On the other hand, it meant her death was a preventable tragedy, an accident that shouldn't have happened. There is no one to blame, no justice to seek, only grief and acceptance of the impossible. The inquest in June 2023 was a public process where all evidence was presented openly. Nicola's family was present, hearing painful details of the final moments of her life, reconstructed from evidence. Police presented their actions and investigation methods. Experts testified about the risks of drowning in cold water, how current could have moved the body, about search techniques that were used. The coroner, having reviewed all evidence, returned a verdict of accidental death. He praised the efforts of police and search teams, noting the scale and thoroughness of the investigation. He also expressed condolences to the family and spoke critically about the role of social media, emphasizing the harm caused by irresponsible speculation. His closing remarks were a call for greater empathy and responsibility in the era of digital communication. For the public, this verdict should have been the final closure of the case. An official investigation, conducted by an independent coroner, reviewed all evidence and reached a clear conclusion. But even after this, some people on the internet continued to doubt, continue to insist on alternative theories. This shows how deeply rooted distrust of official sources is and how attractive conspiracy theories can be for certain groups of people. Psychologists explain this phenomenon in several ways. First, some people have a cognitive style that predisposes them to see patterns and conspiracies where there are none. Second, conspiracy theories give a sense of control and understanding in a chaotic world. It's better to believe that someone secretly controls events than to admit the world is unpredictable and random. Third, belonging to a group of people who know the truth provides social identity and a sense of superiority over the sleeping masses. In Nicola Bulley's case, those who continued to believe in alternative theories even after the official verdict often cited small inconsistencies or unexplained details. Why was the body found exactly there? Why on that particular day? Why did witnesses say one thing and witness be another? For them, these minor inconsistencies were proof of conspiracy, not normal variations in human perception and memory that are present in any investigation. It's important to understand that no investigation is perfect. Witnesses make mistakes, confuse time, misremember details. Physical evidence may be incomplete or ambiguous. These are normal limitations of human cognition and forensic science, not signs of conspiracy. But for those predisposed to see conspiracy, any incompleteness of evidence becomes suspicious. More than a year and a half has passed since Nicola's death, and the case is gradually fading from public consciousness, as inevitably happens. News stories appear, attract attention, then disappear, replaced by the next sensation. But for Nicola's family, time doesn't heal the wound so easily. Every anniversary, every holiday, every family event happens without her. Her daughters grow up without a mother, reach milestones that Nicola should have shared with them. This is a constant loss that doesn't disappear with time, but simply becomes part of the fabric of their lives. Paul Ansel, in one interview, talked about how he tries to keep Nicola's memory alive for his daughters. He shows them photos, tells stories, shares memories. He wants them to know their mother not only as someone who disappeared and died tragically, but as a full person with humor, passions, quirks, love. This is his way of ensuring that Nicola continues to be part of their lives, even in her absence. The Nicola Bulley case has also left a mark on broader culture. It's mentioned in discussions about journalistic ethics, in media literacy courses, in police training programs about public communication. It has become an example of how not to handle a missing person case, how social media can spiral out of control, how important protection of privacy and dignity of victims and their families is. Some positive changes have occurred as a result of this case. Police forces throughout the United Kingdom have reviewed their protocols for handling victims' personal information. Journalistic organizations have updated their ethical guidelines about covering missing persons. Social media platforms have strengthened moderation of certain types of content. This isn't a complete solution to the problem, but steps in the right direction. Educational initiatives have also been launched, aimed at teaching young people critical thinking and responsible use of social media. Schools include lessons about how to verify information, how to recognize misinformation, how to understand the impact of their online actions on real people. These efforts are necessary, but require time to influence culture. Ultimately, Nicola Bulley's story is a story about human fragility, about life's unpredictability, about how tragedy can happen in the most ordinary moment. It's also a story about the dark side of modern connectivity, about how technologies that should bring us closer can be used to cause harm. And it's a story about the importance of empathy, about the fact that behind every headline is a real person deserving dignity and respect. As long as social media and human curiosity exist, there will be cases similar to the Nicola Bulley case. People will disappear, investigations will attract attention, theories will spread. The question is whether we as a society can learn to handle this more responsibly, more compassionately, more humanely. The future will tell. Nicola's family continues to live with this pain, but they have also become a voice for change. Paul Ansel and Nicola's relatives actively advocate for reforms in how police, media, and social networks handle missing persons cases. They work with lawmakers, human rights groups, and educational institutions, try to ensure that no other family goes through what they experienced. Their message is simple but powerful. Remember humanity. When you read about a tragedy, when you see news about a missing person, stop and think about the real people behind this story. Think about the children waiting for their mother at home. Think about the partner who doesn't know if their loved one is alive. Think about the parents living every parent's nightmare. Before sharing a theory, before leaving a comment, before pressing record on a camera, ask yourself, does this help find the person? Am I contributing something valuable or just adding noise and pain? Nicola Bulley's memory lives not only in grief, but also in hope for change. Her story has become a lesson, albeit a bitter one, about what we must do better. We must be better in how we handle the vulnerable moments of other people's lives. We must be better in how we use the power of technology and communication. We must be better in how we show empathy and compassion. Every year, on January 27th, on the anniversary of her disappearance, people gather by the river Wire to honor Nicola's memory. They bring flowers, light candles, share memories. It's a moment of silence in a noisy world, a moment of reflection on life's fragility and the importance of cherishing every day with those we love. For those of us who followed this story from afar, the Nicola Bulley case should serve as a reminder. A reminder that life is precious and unpredictable. A reminder that water safety is not just a warning, but a real necessity. A reminder that our actions on the internet have real consequences for real people. And a reminder that in an era when information spreads instantly, wisdom and compassion must spread just as quickly. Nicola was a daughter, partner, mother, friend, colleague. She was a person with dreams and fears, with strengths and vulnerabilities, with a past and a future that was so cruelly cut short. Her life should not be defined by the circumstances of her death or the media circus that followed. She deserves to be remembered for who she was, not only for how she died. Thank you for being with us on the Fear Files channel. This story reminds us that sometimes the most frightening stories are not about monsters or villains, but about how fragile ordinary life can be, about how one moment can change everything. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Be careful near water. And remember, behind every story are real people deserving our respect and compassion. Rest in peace, Nicola Bulley. Your story will not be forgotten, and the lessons it taught us all will continue to live on, helping to protect others and create a more compassionate world.